right, we'll get started. We'll start by standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you everyone for coming. I will slide over to Dr. Smith for roll call with a board member online.
Wendy Brotherland.
Here.
Kristen Dubois.
Here.
David Gilmat.
Here.
Chip Jones.
Here.
Dan Holman. Leslie Marco.
Here.
Oh, sorry, Noah Easter.
Here.
Patricia Clark.
Here.
Chad White.
Here.
Brian Tarbuck. Andrew Gorel.
Here.
Dave Twitchell.
Here.
Okay. With that, our first item on the agenda is to talk about local school committees as they've developed in the past year. I'm going to hand over this information from Dr. Smith.
All right, so good evening and thank you all for being here. Our first item tonight, as Leslie stated, is an update from Peter Femley. Peter is an attorney with Drummond Woodsum and serves as RSU 38's counsel. Two of our member towns now have established local school committees. The only, and to my understanding, the only RSU in the state with these committees. Our interim board chair asked that we get a clear, common understanding of what those committees are and what role they play, grounded in state statute in our own 2009 district reorganization plan, which is the founding document when the RSU was created and set how the towns and the board relate to one another. Peter did provide this same update to the board earlier this spring. The chair asked that, at the time, asked that he provide it, Leslie asked that to provide it again tonight in an open session so that the towns, the committees, and the public are all working from the same information rather than from different readings of the same documents. And so I'll turn it over to Peter.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for inviting me, and it's a real pleasure to be here tonight and also to have worked with your school board for a number of years supporting your school system. As Dr. Smith just indicated, local school committees are a creature of statute. It's sort of a unique animal, if you will. Back in 2007, there was a reorganization law that was designed to really collapse about 290 school districts down to, the goal was to be about 80. And there were some penalties imposed on schools if they didn't come together. And so that got conversations started. Your conversation here in this community happened over the course of 2 years in 2007, 2008, culminating in the 2009 reorganizational plan, which was about a 20, 30-page document that I'm holding. Your community, as you know, formed an RSU. A number of other communities across the state did as well. Part of that law, because it was hard for a lot of communities to come together and give up that local control, part of that law said those communities, when they formed RSUs, could retain these local advisory school committees, provided that they created them within the organizational plan, and they talked about them and defined the rights and responsibilities. So not, as Dr. Smith just indicated, not many RSUs actually formed local school committees. Yours did, and now you have two, as I understand it. And so, again, it's allowed under the law, but you had to have talked about it, built it into the reorganization plan as occurred in this community. And I'm not aware of another RSU in Maine that has it. A colleague in my office who's done this a little bit longer than I have similarly wasn't aware. So it is unique and special in a way, but the goal tonight is really to talk about what rights and powers the local school committee does have, and how that compares with the rights and powers that the RSU board has. So I just wanted to dive into that, and feel free to, members of the board, feel free to ask questions if you have them. The real purpose of the local school committee is to ensure that that local community, that voice is heard before the RSU board makes any determinations impacting education. It's an advisory role. The reorganization plan specifies that it's their responsibility, the local school committee's responsibility, to maintain communication with the RSU board. It can advise the RSU board about the local elementary school needs in the community. It can help the elementary principal determine particular building needs. It has the ability to supplement the cost, in other words, throw more money at the school building if desired. For example, if they asked for new blinds on the windows in a particular elementary school, the RSU board thought about it but decided not to put the blinds in the budget. That local school committee could go to the town in which they sit and ask the local voters there to supplement the RSU budget and pay for the blinds themselves. So that power does exist. They have a power to present a proposed budget to the school board. Now that's not binding on the board, but the board would look at it and assess it and could make adjustments to your budget if you liked elements of the local school committee proposed budget. But obviously you have to do that in time so that you can consider it in light of the sequence of events that needs to happen before you get a budget passed. As I mentioned, it does have the power to go to the local community to ask that community to appropriate additional funds beyond what the RSU board does have. So under the reorganization plan, it was agreed that the local school committee would not own the land or the building, that title would be held by the RSU board. So the RSU does own the building and the land for each of the school buildings. So in short, I've sort of talked about the rights that the local school committee does have. What it doesn't have is the right that the RSU board has. It can advise the board, but doesn't have the authority to usurp the board's final determination on education matters. And the RSU reorganization plan very clearly says that the RSU board is the only official governing body that is empowered to make decisions of the RSU on these items. And I'm just going to list some so you have a general sense of what it is. Employing the superintendent, so that's hiring and evaluating the superintendent. Financial management of the school system, so that's your payroll, your audits, your purchasing insurance for the buildings and for employees. Providing special education services to kids, managing all things transportation related, buses and vans and whatever other vehicles are used to transport students. RSU board sets the core curriculum and make sure that is aligned with what state regulations require. And that way education is relatively consistent, at least in the core areas across, regardless of what school unit you're in Maine. Obviously, you adopt the budget to operate your schools, and they can advise, what that budget would include. All the reporting, and there's a lot of reporting to the state and the federal government's agencies, demographics and numbers and finances that need to be reported up to the state or federal levels. That's the RSU's responsibility, not the responsibility of the local school committee. Critically, the RSU board is the employer. So you're the one that's responsible for the hiring and the discipline and the evaluation of all school employees. And that also involves handling the labor negotiations. So it doesn't mean that the entire board is involved in negotiating labor contracts with the unions, but you might designate 1, 2, 3 members to serve with the superintendent or assistant superintendent or business manager to sit across the table from the employees and their representative to talk about wages and insurance. The RSU board determines the school calendar and ensures consistency across the school unit, adopting policies for the schools. And then a separate provision of the law indicates that it's the RSU board's responsibility to determine basically which kids will go to what school. So you can decide that depending on how your enrollment process works, you can decide that kids that reside in this particular area will all go to this school. You can decide that we're not going to have fifth grade in this building anymore. It's going to be in that building over there. So it's the RSU board that determines where those particular students that are enrolled within the RSU will actually receive their learning. So to sum up, local school committees are an entity that have a right to share their opinion and their voice with the board. They can supply input. They can raise extra money to supplement the educational program as long as that doesn't conflict with the RSU mission. They don't employ school staff, so they can't direct the principal or the superintendent to do things. That's the responsibility of the board to direct the superintendent to direct administrators to direct others down the chain. And so local school committee members shouldn't be interfering with the work performance or the work responsibilities of your employees. And no power to evaluate or discipline any school staff. They wouldn't have access to personnel files or payroll records or things of that nature. They also wouldn't have special access to your school building beyond, in other words, they wouldn't have the ability to, if you have a general procedure that requires signing in or wearing a badge for security purposes, they wouldn't have any special access. They'd have to comply with those same rules and regulations that any visitor to the school would have. And then local school committee members wouldn't have the ability to rent out your school gym without your approval. So based on the statutes and the reorganization plan, those responsibilities are really pretty clearly laid out, which is, I think, a good thing. And I think Dr. Smith and the chair just wanted to ensure that there was, again, common understanding for folks on the board, any new members of the board, but also individuals in the audience or at home listening. I am not at all saying that the interests or concerns that the local school committee may have don't matter. They're an important stakeholder group in your community, and it is important that you listen to the input and recommendations of all stakeholders in your community before you make some of your hard decisions. And I know you have a number of hard decisions ahead, and I know that's sort of the subject of the strategic planning process, to think about creative ways to do that. But what I'm highlighting here is that the local school committee's focus is singular, and they're focused in on what is good for that particular school, in that particular community, and those particular students, whereas your role is more multifaceted. You're thinking about what's good not just for students in that particular building, but the RSU as a whole, all students and all staff, not just at the elementary level, but middle school and high school as well, and thinking about what's good for really everyone at every level, and how those decisions will impact all stakeholders and not just that focused one. So I know Dr. Smith has some a plan to talk about the strategic planning process. I would just like to offer some thoughts on that, if I may. I understand that there are some concerns floating around about the strategic planning process. The concern, as I understand it, is that the process is really nothing more than a disguised school closure process, that the fix is in and that there's already a predetermined outcome. In my discussions with the superintendent and some board members, that isn't my understanding of what the strategic planning process is, and just wanted to highlight that the strategic planning process is really a brainstorming exercise, looking at the strengths and weaknesses, challenges and opportunities here in your RSU, seeking stakeholder input, really from all corners of the community, really looking for creative ideas to build a stronger, more sustainable school system. It's being driven not by a motive to close a school, but rather a desire to thoughtfully assess how best to move forward and provide education into the future. Being led by an outside entity that doesn't have a particular agenda. So understand also that there's, with respect to potential school closures, there's an entirely separate, distinct statutory process that school units have to go through in order to close a school. And the strategic planning process is not that process. That process, just to summarize it really briefly, it's really pretty time consuming and pretty clunky. It would involve a real detailed open sharing of all information, a lot of data points about demographics and historical trends, but also what the plan will be for busing and for staffing and educating all the students in the event that that building didn't exist anymore and kids had to be relocated and staff relocated. So it's a really detailed, thoughtful plan. It would also require not just the vote of you all, the RSU board, but it would also require voter approval of the community. And so there are a lot of process involved in the possibility of closing a school. And, if you ever get into that place and you want guidance on navigating that process, I can help. But as I understand it, you're not there yet because you're looking at you're in the ideas phase and thinking about ways that you can move forward, possibly without even the need to close the school. So with that, I'll see if there are any questions. But yes.
I've got two. But you just mentioned, and I know that we're not talking this way, but you mentioned that after the RSU board votes, it goes back to the community. Does it go back to the community the school resides in, or does it go to the RSU community so that in this case, all 4 towns would be voting on it?
A really good question. And that is set forth in statute, just not one of the statutes that I printed and brought with me here today. but in reviewing that question this week, my understanding is it could be either, depending on who the students are that go to that school, that will be closed, who's impacted. If it is all students from one community, my understanding is the statute provides that, but I can confirm this with Dr. Smith in the morning, that it would be the one community that sends those particular students. But if it's a mix from multiple communities, then obviously it impacts the broader RSU stakeholder group, and as a result, it would go out to all the voters. That's my read, but I don't have it in front of me to confirm it, but like I said, I can confirm it shortly after this meeting.
My second question was going back to the divisions of the committee and the board. You had mentioned that if there was a funding issue, that the committee could raise the funds. Do they solely have that opinion to raise those funds, or do they still need approval by the board to raise those funds?
Well, another good question. They have, they can advise and work to convince you at the RSU board to raise the funds. If they fail in that, and you say, no, we're not going to raise those additional funds, they have the power to not do it themselves, but they have the power to go to the town elected officials. So, for example, the Wayne School Committee, if they come to you saying, we want those lines, and you say no, they could go to the Wayne Town Council and ask that municipal entity to appropriate additional funds to supplement the RSU budget. And the voters would need to approve that.
And that's where I was kind of going with it. What if those, and we can use your blinds, what if the RSU board deemed those types of blinds are not what the RSU wants, or it's a safety hazard in the building? However it may come up, if the board says, we don't want this in the building, can they still go back and raise the funds in the community and put it in the building? Because it's a little contradictory, because you said that the RSU owns the buildings, but then they can raise funds to do something in that building. Do they need the board's permission to raise those funds locally, or can they just say, we asked you, you said no, now we were gonna go raise it locally?
That's a bit of a complex question, and it raises, it really would depend on whether it is a controversial purchase. I mean, if the blinds, everyone wants the blinds, but you just don't want to pay for them, but they find another source, then we don't have a conflict.
Right, I was just using the blinds as, because you were, but I'm saying like, a good example is, I don't believe they allow air conditioners in windows. And what if they said, we want to put air conditioners in our windows, and we said, no, that's not going to be part of the budget? Can they go back and get the town to raise the money to purchase air conditioners and put them in the windows?
I think I would need to better understand why air conditioners aren't going to windows, whether it's an AC, an OSHA-related issue, and confirm whether there's some legal reason why they shouldn't be. So I guess the short answer is, in the event that you found yourself in that position, you'd have to look at it and those facts in that.
Okay.
Sure. Go ahead, Andrew.
Thanks. Not to go too far into strategic planning questions, since I know this is mainly about the local school committees, but because you did bring up a question that I've been interested in. So according to what I heard, it is very clear that the strategic planning process components cannot be construed as counting towards the school closure process that you mentioned, like such as those like timelines and saying you have to have like 2 years of discussion and so many public hearings. Is it clear from what you're saying that the strategic planning, public hearings, that timeline would not count towards the school closure process and timeline, that would have to be initiated after strategic planning completed?
Suspect that there could be overlap but what the statute requires is the board vote and voter approval. The reorganization plan talks about the amount of information that needs to be developed in the process, and I assume that if there's a lot of data that's developed through the strategic planning process, that same data could be utilized. But that doesn't mean that the outcome of the strategic planning process is going to satisfy the vote requirement or the voting requirement that's necessary in the statute. So you'd still have a couple boxes to check, if you will, under that statute in order to close this.
And presumably, like to be very specific, the school closure process requires like a certain number of public hearings. The public hearings that occur as part of strategic planning could not be retroactively claimed as public hearings counted towards that total?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I haven't looked at that question.
Okay. Well,
I mean, I can clarify, the public forums are all visioning related to strategic planning. That's what the public forums will entail. And so really looking at student outcomes. And so I don't want to conflate what the community forums are going to be focused on strategic planning and I'll be going over that in a minute.
Okay, yeah, no, I was just
Yeah.
curious to make sure or to understand whether they could later be counted as part of some of those things on the checklist, but it sounds like probably
I
not.
don't think they can, and the only reason I don't think they can is because when you talk about anything to do with that, I believe it's got notices in paper, it's, DOE has their own process to go through, so I don't think you can say, hey, yeah, but we talked about it 2 weeks ago, and now we're gonna say that was that. I think there's other steps that have to be put out there that directly say, this is why we're doing that.
That makes
Or
sense.
this is why we're having that meeting.
Right, that makes total
Yeah.
sense. Great. Thank you.
Also, Dan says he is.
Question.
Go ahead, David.
Thank you. I don't know whether it applies or it's better in a different place. Following on the closure versus strategic plan, I definitely understand a distinct difference there and have no problem with that. But what I am concerned about is a process that through the strategic plan or just through board and administration planning, actually denudes a school or schools of a lot of their abilities or sufficiencies, whatever, that brings it so that it becomes almost impractical to keep the school open, and consequently makes it an easy decision for most of the communities to say, well, nothing's happening here, or things are not working very well. And my concern relates to, as in the principal or principals being split up, so that all of a sudden two of the schools have a partial principal, and other things that support the schools being reduced for reasons that are rationally worked out, but end up producing a much less of a school. That concerns me, and that's something a strategic plan can do that in effect leads to a closure, but isn't closing the school, so would not actuate the more intense process required by the state.
Thank you, David. I want to make sure that we sort of hone ourselves back to what we really asked Peter to come for today. The goal, from my perspective, and what I asked Dr. Smith was, I have not been on the board forever and ever. It was only in the last year I learned about the Wayne Local Advisory Committee, and I had not known that existed. And then now Mount Vernon had, as a resident of Mount Vernon, we voted and had individuals now forming there. So I thought it would just be easier if now, since that happened and it happened a few months ago, that Peter's, as a great resource, can help just to, at one time, in a place where we actually will also have recorded it, we'll have put it online, it'll be very accessible to folks, sort of walk through what the committees are for, and to his point, was to help us, but also to just sort of share and sort of answer and discuss it sort of openly, because the goal is that all that we're doing is very open, and we're taking steps at a time. And so as we continue to get used to these committees and how we work together and field information or ideas that want to be of consideration, like we find good ways to do that. We find ways to do that that are respectful of what everybody has as overarching and core responsibilities for the children and for the staff to keep the school moving on its regular day-to-day, as well as finding the right cadence to work in what type of things might come from those committees and the best time for them to come so they can be a part of other processes. As we know, we jump into the budget like really early, and we've done even better in the past few years so that we can really take things in bites and have good discussion. We have to not approach the strategic planning process from a place of fear. We need to embrace the process guided by an outside consultant from a place of possibility and clarity and alignment, all focused with a singular focus on the children and the community members that pay and vote to support them. And that really is all, like that literally is all. And when there's such a large group, and Karen's going to get in this, there's such a large group that continues to build in this process of being a part of the discussion and the pieces and milestones, it really feels not as practical to think that there's something very quick or sneaky or underhanded or backdoor that can occur in this very open, transparent, and lots of involvement type of process. And so we shouldn't fear something that is whatever faces a bunch of schools through the state in consideration and thought that should be almost every year. What do we do? What are our options? Where are we at? And that's just every year as we figure out what to do with budgets and what to do, and whether that's coming up with new ideas or reusing old ones or continuing to do what we do today. Like, We have to just decide what that is in the moment and take the next bite, which is a year at a time. The strategic planning process allows us to take a bigger bite over the span of a few years. And as any goaling process would encourage, is that trickle down ties to all the other things that we decide as a district, ties back to those same goals and rolls up to those same goals in the common agreement that we're doing the right things, because it all goes back to a very collaborative process that gets finalized for a bite of time. And then that's the best you can do, right? Because there's still plenty we don't know that could happen, right? We didn't plan for 2020. We didn't plan for the 6 years that it took to get trying to find our way back. And this is already 6 years later from how crazy that was. So I encourage everybody to stay heavily engaged with a positive and respectful way of talking through things that we think about, but let things take its course just a little bit. But we're all able to participate at some point. So I thank Peter for coming. I do have one extra question though about the local committees, just to clear up what I maybe thought I heard at one point, and if you don't know this, it's okay to round back. But I feel like there was part of a conversation earlier as we were trying to get towards budget closure and final draft, and that we were sending what we had voted on and what we sent to the voters to vote upon. If one of the local committees wanted, because I know we talked about blinds, we've thoroughly talked about blinds. But what was real and what was talked about was staff. So like, let's just be clear about what that is. So if it's feeling, if the board, if the budget, if whatever feels as though something can't exist that a town does want to exist, are they able to raise funds to, that goes directly towards maintaining a staff member that the school did not budget for out of the full district tax appropriation? And if yes, because I could picture that maybe there's a yes, I don't know, it might not be. But even if it's a yes, and you'll answer me just in a minute, is that something that would then need, like each year it must still go through like a similar process of like, will this continue for another year? Does it still take a fiscal bite? Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
Do you have anything that you could answer today?
Yeah, I don't read the reorganization plan or the state statute to say that the local school committee could appropriate money by going to another municipality,
Right.
and then force you to utilize that money to hire people. The law is very clear that the RSU makes the determination about who to hire, when to hire, or how to hire. And that the law is also clear that the budget for the RSU, final adoption, and where the money is spent, that's your decision. They can ask, they can request, they can try to encourage and entice, but they don't have the ability to tie your hands and direct you to utilize that. The state statute empowers this body right here to decide how best to utilize the resources that are within. So if they wanted to give additional money, I don't think there's any reason why the RSU couldn't accept it, but that may not necessarily go to the purpose that they desire. You could put it towards, I'm not going to use blinds.
Right. So I think my point would be, it doesn't mean that it couldn't.
Curtains.
It doesn't mean an agreement couldn't be made that, like, it could,
It could, sure.
but it doesn't become that it does have to.
Correct.
Is what you're saying. So that makes it not a lot different in just that theory when it comes to like personnel, say, that when we have our local town meeting where there's a vote and there's a room vote of whomever participates and arrives for that to participate, if there was a vote in the town meeting room to increase the amount of a certain warrant article, and there's a thought that it would go towards something very specific, the increase of the warrant article could pass in the room, but there still is no statute that would still dictate to the school what they have to spend the additional funds on.
Correct.
But it doesn't mean it still couldn't be with the shared, whatever the shared thought would be.
And even once you have an established budget with X $1,000 in this line and Y $1,000 in that line, there is ability to transfer from line to line within certain statutory limits, certain percentages, certain dollar amounts that you can shift because, things happen during the year. You may need to hire more people in your special ed department because you have, a number of students that just happen to move into your community that need those special services. And as a result, you need qualified staff to do that under federal law or you're violating their civil rights.
Right.
And so that increases one line, you then have to shave and borrow from a different line. So there's always that flexibility to manage and move that money in the way that you believe is best for your kids in the RSU.
Okay.
I think Dan's.
Oh,
David's good.
David, is your hand up from before or is it up again?
Up again.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think you had very important comments there. I like that. We were talking about the local committee being able to raise money, and I agree it would be the board's decision, the school, RSU's decision, whether to use that for the blinds as requested. But I do think from my limited understanding of it, it sounded like that the committee and the local town can specify what it would be used for as opposed to at the budget meeting that's for the whole RSU. Not that they would be able to require the district and the board, the RSU and the board to use it that way, but that they could say that if you're not going to use it that way, then our town voters approved it for that, so that it's not available unless you're going to use it in that way. And that's a thought, question, whatever.
I think that's a technical question, and in the event that that issue were to arise, it involves sort of tracking one statute into another in order to, but I think at its core, if I heard the last comment right, I do think that, I think that the town could raise the money and offer it to the RSU with the condition that it be utilized for that. And that if the RSU determines that it's not going to utilize it for that, then it's like it didn't happen. So I do think there could be some restrictions placed on that money at the town level. But that's really a question for the town's attorney, not the schools, because that would be the vote that the town council would need to make when appropriating those additional funds.
Yes, and clearly today we can't run through every scenario that we may or may not need to even discuss in the future. Peter's always very good to respond to us very promptly when we reach out, when we have a question for something that does come up. But thought that at least if we sort of hit a bunch of things today, it might help us all be on the same page. Andrew, did you have one more thing?
Yeah, I agree. I don't really want to get into the weeds on a lot of these things.
Yeah.
I don't think nobody's going to try to hire teachers. That's a year-on recurring cost.
Yeah,
Tons
yeah.
of problems there. But one very basic element of it that I'm not realizing I'm not clear on, if the committee did raise money, are they then obligated to give it to the RSU budget, or can they simply go out and buy the blinds and give them to the school? Like, does it have to go through the budget, or can they just go buy some blinds? If we're talking, I mean, it sounds like this is geared towards relatively simple capital expenditures, not like staff hiring.
Correct.
Can they just buy some blinds, or is that exclusively?
Again, I think that does depend a little bit on whether there's a cost associated with adding the blinds and installing the blinds, and whether the RSU wants those blinds in the building. Now, if it goes back to if everybody wants the blinds, it's not enough money at the RSU level, but you find the money in Wayne and you it's a donation and everyone's happy, then the blinds are up.
Well, I guess that's if everybody agrees, if there's no
Yeah.
controversy,
So
can the committee just directly buy the blinds, or are they obligated to give the money to the RSU and ask them to buy the blinds?
So I think certainly the town could buy blinds if it wants to and then donate to the RSU, but then the RSU would have a choice as to whether they want to utilize those blinds, that gift. And they can decline the gift.
Sure, yeah.
You know,
I was just
you can
curious if the
accept or you can
process
decline gifts.
mandated going through the RSU. It sounds like it doesn't necessarily. Okay.
Peter, I thank you for your time and coming today, very much.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Oh, did Dan have a question?
Oh, Dan, did you have a question for Peter?
I just slowed it with Peter going, but I guess I could say, if you think of the situation, was it 2 years ago with Wayne, with the reading instructor that was cut? That seemed like a scenario where that was maybe, like, that would maybe fit, like a town would raise money to maintain a position that really was a budget cut. Versus blinds, the other thing talked about was air conditioning. Well, I could imagine the RSU saying, yeah, but we're paying the electricity. Maybe we don't want it because it's a slippery slope. So I'm just trying to think in terms of practical, like, here are the scenarios that this might come into play, and all of which would involve a lot of negotiation.
Right, I think my takeaway is nothing, if we're doing things well, we're having open conversations, and we figure out where the desire and the purpose and the resources can come from, and then we figure out what we need to do to make that happen, and between which group can be determined.
It is a challenge to answer hypotheticals where I don't know what each side's interest is, and I don't really understand whether the money's there or not, or whether what's being asked would be, would cause some labor issue, or some health issue, or some extra cost for electricity, and whether everyone's in agreement or everyone's really upset about the possibility. So I do think that I'm hoping that in the event that there's ever a need to raise additional money, that it all works out smoothly for you.
Yeah.
In the event that there's a conflict, give me a ring, and we can talk through it. And,
Call you on the red phone.
yeah, and I'd be more than happy to walk you all through it.
Yeah, it's all fine.
In the moment.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Peter.
Next on the agenda is that update on the strategic planning process by Superintendent Smith.
Okay. And I just have a slide deck that Diane is going to put up. I'll give her a moment to do that. While she is doing that, this is just an update as of tonight. As you know, we're building a strategic plan, a shared statement of what we want our schools to deliver for students over the next year, 2 years, whatever ends up being decided. It's a study of how well our buildings serve that vision, and it runs alongside it, The three things that I want to preface tonight is what the plan will produce, who is at the table, and what happens between now and next spring. There's also a handout that accompanies this slide deck that I have at the door for anyone in the audience, and all board members have that handout as well. No. So the Plan to Plan Committee reviewed materials and agreed upon NESDEC as our consultant. That happened in May and in June. We and the Plan to Plan Committee reviewed materials from the consultants that we reached out to. We sat through presentations of 2 consultants that we invited. One came in person, one was on Zoom. One of the 3 finalists ended up backing out as an option because after the plan-to-plan committee determined what our wants were from a consultant, that one consultant, which was from MSMA, determined that our scope of what we wanted, so for example, in-person meetings, a big one, was not something that they could offer. Later, this individual through MSMA, who's a former superintendent that just retired, who also has been operating as a strategic planning consultant, has written a couple books. He is also a board on NESDEC, a board member on NESDEC, and he, David DeRossi, our consultant, reached out to him, and he will be working with Dave DeRossi. So that one that backed out ended up joining forces with NESDEC and really can help us with a local context and familiarity with Maine law, regulations, and so forth. So again, we evaluated the 3 firms. The committee voted 7-1. And so we went forward with the agreement, which was signed by June 25th, and that is posted on the district website. So we're creating this plan to maintain and enhance the delivery of high-quality, comprehensive educational services and to serve as a benchmark for improving the school district. So it produces 6 things: a profile of where the district stands today, our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges. Vision works with focus groups to picture the district, where we want it, and compare it to what we have. It determines strategic objectives drawn from the data and from what the community tells us. It then develops strategic initiatives, answering the questions of how did we get there, and a vision, a mission, a core values with a theory of action for student learning, with ultimately having outcomes so that we can tell whether or not what we determined that we are meeting what we have set forth to do. Running alongside this is a facilities use study, which will be an analysis of our students' present and future educational needs in relation to our spaces across the district. So it asks whether our spaces serve the education we want for children, not necessarily like what our buildings are worth. So the actual community planning team, just to go back, is the voices of this strategic planning process. We had 58 people that signed up to, seeking to participate on the community planning committee. We ended up selecting 17 members of that committee. They're listed on that handout, as well as on the slide deck. One thing that I just want to welcome is those committee members. And if you are any of those committee members in the audience, can you raise your hand? I'm not sure. Okay. There's names that I wasn't familiar with. So one person in the audience, they all are aware, and David NESDEC will be scheduling a quick meet and greet meeting on Zoom with them for Monday. We'll be sending out a call for that meeting for the community planning team on Monday. But the real work will begin starting on August 19th. The first session that NESDEC will do with visioning for strategic planning will be with the district leadership team in the morning. And then in the afternoon, they will do the same visioning process with the community planning team. Okay. And feel free if anyone has any questions on the board. I just want to make sure So kind of the edge, the way NESDEC and the way it's explained in their agreement is that there's a district leadership team and there's also this community planning team. The district leadership team is the engine, so to speak, gathering all the data, the student achievement data, all this, the type of data that obviously the district leadership team will have access to help inform. The community forums, which we have some tentative dates. I'm just confirming with David DeRossi on those community forum dates, but also we have to reach out. We just want to make sure there's no conflicts on those evenings with the municipalities. If they have meetings going on, we don't want any conflicts, obviously. So we're just finalizing those dates. We're looking, it's like a 3-week window, the last 2 weeks in September and the first week in October. David NESDEC really wanted to try to get that, those community forums completed by the end of the second week in October, because then they go into doing their data analysis of all the information that's been gathered. So we also have set with NESDEC to do these visioning sessions with the staff in the district. And so we have an early release day at the end of September that we will capture some of the staff at that time. And then we have a professional day on October, the second Friday in October. And David will come with his team on that day and probably do a couple different sessions so that we can make sure that we get all the staff in doing the visioning sessions. So ultimately, there'll be a visioning session with the district leadership team, a visioning session with the community planning team, and a visioning session each with all 4 communities, and then a visioning sessions with all school employees. So that's, again, what we're planning on having done. And when they get all that information, it's going to take them some time their team behind the scenes to look at the themes, look at all the things and what they do, because this is what they are experts in on strategic planning and creating this process. They will then bring that back to the leadership team, packaged in a certain way based on what all of these stakeholders and what the data is showing. And then it's going to be a back and forth process where it'll go to the district leadership team, and then it'll go to the the community planning team, and then back to the district leadership team, and so forth, until we get a draft. Some things that are not completely hashed out are, for example, if there's certain portions of the strategic plan and how we might bring that back to the board and have the board kind of bless that, and so that we can move on to another portion, so to speak, and so forth, so that we can be as efficient as possible. We're not bringing everything to the board all at once. So there'll be updates, there'll be feedback with the board, and we'll determine what that might look like. It will be done publicly. I know that, and that we'll have perhaps have David DeRossi come to the board meeting to give an update, or Zoom in to give an update, and so forth. So let me just make sure I'm getting everything. So just in closing, NESDEC's own standard is that the measure of the plan's success is how much of it actually makes it into practice, and that is what we intend to hold us to. The process will be visible, the data will be public, and you'll have a chance to weigh in well before we make a final vote on the strategic plan. Any questions from the board?
online, Diane, anybody? Good,
Okay,
all set?
yeah.
All right,
And so this is the real reason why we had to have, I mean, not the real reason, but the main reason why we had to have the special board meeting is because the state law that has indicated on cell phone policies that have to be in effect before the school, by August 1 and before the school year begins. So that was, I took the opportunity to have the local school committee
Yeah.
and the update on the strategic plan, piggybacking on the fact that we actually had to get this policy through so that the principals can get their student handbooks updated and finalize their procedures so that they're ready for students on day one, for staff and then students on day one.
so does that mean we're gonna jump to that and over the committees and,
Oh, sorry, no, we got that, sorry, no.
so we'll do that first then?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll back up from the board policy momentarily.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. We'll back up from the cell phone policy just for a minute to quickly, as we thought, again, we were having the meeting, like what else could we sort of take the opportunity to do now? Because once we do start our regular practice of meetings, it starts quick, there's already a lot that needs to get done. And then these folks are also extremely busy, as we all know. So we thought, well, let's check off a few things and give board members some time to also think and get back. So one of those is related to, while it's not required that we vote on our board meeting like calendar, like we do for the school calendar itself, but Karen really walked through sort of how to lay out board meetings for the year, and there is a slight variation to what you may have been used to. It was definitely at one point, you were able to follow a mantra of like, it's the first and third, like Wednesday of the month, but that just doesn't always work out best for the whole year. So I think if we could sort of wipe that theory out of it's always gonna be very specific like that, as much as we'll have a list and it'll be really clear, they'll be on all our calendars. That is here, and in your packet, then there is a draft of when board meetings will occur. And in turn, also, instead of stacking, and I think there's probably still some flexibility, Karen, you'd say, even though negotiations, those get set and the times get set separate from everything else. Once a committee still is together, they can be flexible with those team members as to when they meet, but there is some suggestion and some predictability we want to give to the public because they are meetings the public can attend and so on and so forth. So we do want to be able to have enough information and notice that we're able to announce when those meetings exist.
So the, right,
Yeah,
so
go
the
ahead.
board meeting calendar is there, and we'd like to get that publicly posted.
Yes.
And again, like Leslie said, we don't have to vote, the board does not have to vote on it, but we kind of
Right.
wanted to get your eyes on it, and if there was any feedback before we officially put it out there publicly. And again, I worked with, behind the scenes and met with Leslie, how it makes sense with the ebb and flow of how the school year works, where the school vacations occur, the back-to-back meetings in April, May, and June was crazy.
Yeah.
And to get ready for those, you're doing like student recognition and staff evaluations and retirements, and it was a lot. And also just the flow of how the budget, like we don't have any choice on certain dates, like when we've got to have to have the board approve the budget, when we have the annual meeting, there's timeline and dates, so that it can go to referendum and then to have the board meet right after the referendum vote, so that you can sign. So like there's certain things like we have to follow that. So, again, all on Wednesday evenings, but it's not necessarily
The
always
first
the
and
first
third.
and third Wednesday. And so I just want to make sure people are mindful of that. And then for the subcommittee meetings, we plan to have the subcommittee meetings on Wednesday evenings that are not the board meeting nights, so that there's always just Wednesday nights. And then the plan would be to do 2 subcommittees when needed, one starting earlier in the evening And that's on that handout that's in your packet, and then one a little bit later. So, and then there can be some flexibility depending on who chooses to be on those subcommittees on if we schedule the later one or the earlier one, if that makes sense. And we also, and what you'll see is a description of the subcommittees, who was on it last year. And then, Leslie's gonna, ask, people that want to volunteer to be on, so that when we meet in September, our first meeting on September 9th, that we can finalize, hopefully, the subcommittees, and it's not into October when we finalize them, that's typically when we do it.
And then everything can get started, right? Like, we don't have to keep trying to get some things done to get going. We can have gotten a few things done by thinking about some stuff now. So in your packet, you do have that list of those committees. And so if you guys can be thinking about that, you can email Amy Tarian if you want to say, I would like to come off or come on, and here's what my interest is. And then we can look at that collectively and figure out, are we balanced, are we not balanced, so on and so forth. So just send it to Amy, and then we'll look at the collection of things, and we'll ask the group. I'll probably call some of you just to see where we're at and ask if there's anything, different that we could balance. But we'll at least start here. And that way too, this becomes part of minutes, and this can get posted so folks also know what the committees are. One change is that we did pull what was called the communication committee, because we're doing all this other work.
The strategic planning.
Yeah, that there's already going to be a lot of embedded communication as a whole. So it didn't feel like it was necessary to continue to, that group had even come together at a time where it felt like maybe it was necessary to have extra help to try to get something done. And I think now things are falling into place really well, and we've started to get a really good cadence. Dr. Smith's done a good job, the administrator's done a good job to start having a better cadence, and it focuses around a lot of the shared project work that we already have for the year.
So to kind of pausing that communications committee concept for the year while we're strategic planning, but then reconvene as a group after, and we can talk about this more, but other districts kind of like a visioning committee, but it's really a committee that kind of sees that the strategic plan is, it's a committee to oversee that we're doing what we say in the strategic plan, and providing input on that is something I've learned that other districts do.
Mm-hmm. Any questions on that for folks? If you could give Amy what you think, like by the end of next week or something, I'd say that's probably a good chunk of time. Sooner the better.
One clarifying question. So are you saying that now the subcommittee meetings would be on nights that we do not have a school board meeting?
We'll do the opposite of school board meetings, correct? Unless, there's a reason to have it before a board meeting. But I think there was a couple instances where we had to have executive sessions, and then it became.
And those you can't always plan when they have to happen, they
yeah.
have to happen in a certain timely amount of time.
Right, and so it's easier to do the executive sessions on a board night, and sometimes to start the board meeting earlier.
I see.
Yeah.
So some folks would have been here like from 4 till 9 o'clock or something, you know what I mean? Like for the extra things that might come along. But I would still say that for each subcommittee as a whole, the cadence of when that meets, and so it's not like a committee meets every week. It's a committee maybe meets every week, but it's not that every committee meets every week.
No, right.
Yeah.
And I mean, if it works better for most, that's great. I'll throw out that would make it harder for me to serve in a committee that met frequently, simply because that would be more.
Yep.
Much easier for me to come an hour early than to reserve an entire night.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this is not one thing more.
100%.
But that's just me. If it doesn't affect anybody, it works out perfectly great. But
Okay, all right.
So, and this I'm gonna just add to that. So Andrew, say you wanted to do the curriculum committee, which our new assistant superintendent will oversee. That will probably meet maybe once in the fall and once in the spring. And so maybe that could be on a board night that we know that there's not, but it does, again, if we have to have an executive session, it's hard.
yeah, I understand.
Okay.
I think we can work out most things once we figure out where everybody wants to land, you know what I mean? Okay, so by the end of next week to Amy Tarian, who's the administrative assistant in central office. Awesome, perfect. That then swings us around to the cell phone policy.
I move to approve policy JICJ, cell phones and other personal electronic devices in school as presented by the policy committee.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Wendy, do you want to, as the lead of that committee, do you want to just talk briefly about the process that we went through?
Of course.
Because I know it wasn't a significant change to what we were already doing.
Well, the biggest change is the bell to bell, and that when the kids enter the school, they will be turning off their cell phones and putting it in a designated area, and it will remain there until the final bell, so they will pick it up. And they are able to take their phones to whatever they have after school. If they have any kind of athletics or meetings or anything, that's when they can use their phones. And they can also have their phones on the bus as well. So that is the biggest change. And they're not gonna be able to have them in the hallways or the cafeteria. It stays locked up for the whole day. And this is really a great idea because from the research they've had, kids start talking to one another. They put down their phones and they are communicating face to face. Isn't that incredible? So they're finding the schools that have already adopted this policy have kids that are really enjoying their school experience without the cell phones. And there are exceptions for kids who absolutely need one, maybe a health issue or an individual learning plan or something like that. And parents are able to call the school anytime to get a message to their child. So, back in the Stone Age when I went to school, we didn't have phones, they didn't exist. And our parents, just kind of, they're at school, yay. So I'm excited for the communication and maybe some new friendships and putting them down and having conversations and making friends, making plans, maybe finding, new interests and new, and less distracting, definitely, and more education. Understand too that some of the classes will go learn more per class because there won't be a distraction of the cell phones. So that's, anything I missed?
No, and I sent out a letter from me, just kind of preempting this, because, the communications needed to get out. It was put into effect, and technically by August 1, we were supposed to have the policy in place. We did have it at the board policy committee level, and then obviously this evening. So the principals are just waiting to send out their communications after you vote. So that they can follow up with more the finer details within their buildings, and make sure it's in their student handbooks and so on and so forth.
And the last thing I want to say is this is the law in Maine. So it's not like we're, made this up. This is how it is now. So thank you.
How it is, and then we organize how we'll do it. And so that's where we're living
And
now.
I just got this in the mail today, the new 2026-2027 edition of the Maine Education School Statutes, and it's already in here.
Look at all those Post-its. Busy. It's busy. With all of that, any other?
I do. So the kids are not gonna have any access to their phone.
During the school day.
Okay.
Unless they leave for the day.
Is that while they're in school, or is that while school is going on? Because there's a fine difference between being in the building during school and not being in the building during school.
Be more specific.
You have kids that go to CATSI.
Yeah?
So when when they leave for CATSI, they sign out and they can pick up their phone And
Isn't that still a school?
so, so the high school administration has made this decision that they can sign out, have their cell phone on the bus, and they're working with the new CATSI director
They'll be recorded.
to be collected there, as Augusta school system is also finalizing their policies.
Okay. So I do have one more question, and it comes to, hold on a second. Offenses. So the first offense is a verbal warning. Have we had any discussions on how we get to the offense? Because I've had some people raise concern about if my child turns their phone off, and I know it's against the law at this point, and puts it in their bag, and it's shut off, how does the school know that they have a phone?
I mean, that's the old age.
I'm just saying that has come up.
Right.
You get caught with it though.
Right.
It's, if they take it out of their bag, if they sign out to use the restroom and they're bringing their bag with them,
Right.
and they take it out.
Okay. And one more, and this is actually directed toward you guys. You have, what, a half hour to collect these phones, store them in some kind of bin, and lock them away. How does the end of the day look? Because now
Just
you
as
have
fun.
a bell, and instead of, a bus coming in from Mount Vernon and kids getting off, and then a bus coming in from Manchester, kids getting off, now you have a bell and everybody is just bum rushing the front office.
So the high school administration has been working on that procedure at end of the day, and designated essentially a staff person who is cell phone duty, so to speak. And they are working through those processes and finalizing them. We're gonna do the best that we can.
Yeah, I just,
Until,
And there are other schools that already did this before the law. So like,
And-
we don't
and-
have to reinvent the
Right,
wheel.
but-
We
Yeah.
should be reaching
but
out to other
some-
school partners
but a
that
lot
do
of
this
those
already.
schools that did start it, they have the magnetic locking bags that the students always carry the phone with them. And then at the bell, the magnets turn green and they just walk by, unlock it, and they deposit the bag. So I'm just saying,
That
like,
sounds sweet. That may not, that's not in our that's not in our immediate future.
no, I'm just saying,
Yeah, it's very
those
expensive.
ones that went through that process already received certain amount of funding to do that.
Yep.
kind of stuff too.
Yep.
so, and the DOE did provide a little bit of funding, so it's gonna help offset the cost of what the district, the middle school and high school had to purchase for their containers. The elementary is, as you can imagine, is not as a big a deal. And so, but especially the high school and middle school, they did have to kind of come up with a plan and purchase some containers that they can use. So. And we'll provide updates. We will provide updates. I'm
more to come.
sure Michelle LaForge is gonna just love to provide updates in her monthly update and so forth.
There will be
Yes.
more to come.
Yeah.
Like the pictures we used to see of Mr. Boston, sending traffic through Reedfield Elementary. Like, we will see similar things like that of Cal with cell phones, I bet. Yeah. So I don't remember if it was in there, and it's probably gonna maybe just be a part of what the administrators come out with, but if you're listening at home, maybe find a way to label your phone now. Label it in a meaningful and sustainable way. And then we all chip in to make it as easy as possible. That's at least a start, right? So people can be thinking about that. So with that, it's, we are encouraging this to be a fast-tracked approval process of this policy versus time between like a first read or a second read or whatever, because the law dictates. Just as any policy we put in play, should we feel like there is an edit that needs to happen, we simply raise that in the same format in the future, and we vote on making an edit and bring it back to the policy committee. It gets work done again, but for now, we need one in place. So with that, we need to roll call for a vote.
Hold on, I have one more comment.
Ooh, yeah, hi.
I'm really happy to see this happen. It stinks that the state had to make this law first for us to follow suit. I wish that we could have done it on our own. That's not a knock or anything, but I think it's a step in the right direction, and I hope that we can further look at more technology and how it's affecting our kids, the technology in the schools. So I know we have a lot going on right now, but I hope that that's something we can continue to address once we see the positive outcome of this.
Thank you, Kristen. Fire away.
Okay. Wendy,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Chip,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Noah,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Patricia,
Yes.
Chad,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
David, Twitchell.
Yes.
And that's everyone. So that's a unanimous pass.
Did I get everyone?
Well, other than Brian not being here.
Brian Charles.
Yeah, not here. All right, that would take us to citizens' comments, which either Chip is running to the restroom or he has taken it upon himself to help with this stage of the process. Thank you. We have one person left that didn't cross their name off, but they are not here. Teresa Kirschner is not here, so there is no citizens. So we did move citizens' comments to the end, so we could get through content, and then if there were relevant questions that would come up that didn't get answered through all the content and everything we reviewed, there would be a chance for folks to speak up, so, but it looks like all questions were answered. And so we are good then. I think that means motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Very good, if I'm supposed to, okay.